freshly plowed fields. Scenes like this are nothing new across the Commonwealth, as farmers will turn crops several times each year. But on one particular day, in a location and on a date that have never been disclosed, something remarkable happened in a Kentucky field just like this one. Now, as farmers often do, this particular man was out walking his field that he had just plowed when something caught his eye. Now, what he saw looked out of the ordinary, so he took his hands and he started to dig around. Here now is actual video of what happened next. As he dug, gold and silver coins began to spill out. He dug more, and more coins kept appearing. In total, the farmer had stumbled upon what's now being called the Great Kentucky Hoard, a literal treasure trove of more than 800 coins, including 1863 double eagles, silver coins, and hundreds of U.S. gold dollars dating back from 1850 to 1862. One included an imprint from a burlap bag, giving a clue as to how they were buried. The face value of the coins around $1,200. In today's dollars, that's around $24,000. They sold for more than $3 million. Jeff Garrett runs Mid-America Rare Coin Galleries in Lexington. He literally wrote the book on Civil War-era gold coins, sits on the board of directors of the Smithsonian Museum of American History, and has appeared on the popular TV show Pawn Stars about a half a dozen times. As a result, he gets about 25 emails a day from people who think they may have valuable coins. Now, 99% of those don't pan out. But one day, Jeff got an email with a grainy photo of an 1863 gold double eagle coin, a very rare find. The sender, who is the farmer, wanted to meet to talk just about this one coin.
And he has a little briefcase, and then he pulls out, I can't remember how it started, but fairly quickly he showed me 5 coins. And I'm like, and the condition of the coins were astounding. They're really like mint condition. So I was blown away, and I was like, tell me more. What's the deal here? Then it was like the big reveal. Okay, I found 800 gold coins in a cornfield, and there are 18 of these 1863 20s. So at that point, I'm like, virtually, shaking with excitement. I'm like, this is unbelievable.
So the next step was to figure out exactly what was in the hoard. The coins needed to be cleaned and preserved. That meant getting them to experts in Florida, which would entail getting on an airplane while carrying millions of dollars in rare coins. Did the farmer travel with you?
Yes.
What do you talk about when you're sitting on an airplane with $3 million in coins with you?
We don't talk about anything. It was, he had a different seat. It was very low key. Everything has to be, everything for security, you're very low key when you do things like this.
How in the world can something that's been sitting in the ground for 150 years be in mint condition like that?
Gold, it's one of its beautiful aspects is that gold is not, it's impervious to corrosion. And a gold coin can be buried for 2,000 years. And you can bring it up and it'll look like the day it was made. So gold is, that's one of its unique properties. It doesn't corrode.
So why would someone bury the cash equivalent of the yearly salary of 9 soldiers in the Civil War? Amy Murrell Taylor is a historian at the University of Kentucky. She says the banks of today bear no resemblance to what banks looked like in the 1800s.
The Civil War scrambles things, and for people who were living during the Civil War, they had actually already lived through 2 financial panics in the United States. In 1837 and 1857, many banks failed. So they had already gone through this tumultuous period, and now here comes the Civil War.
Add this mistrust of banks to what was going on in Kentucky at this point of the war, and Murrell Taylor says you can understand how such a treasure ended up in the ground.
Banks are being robbed. They're very vulnerable to enemy forces. So in Kentucky, in particular, we've got Confederate raiders who are ripping through the state, 1864, 1863, and banks, for that reason too, don't seem that reliable or safe. So, and then you're afraid that maybe some of these enemy raiders are going to come onto your property. So you've got to make sure it's somewhere that can't be seen. It can't be in an obvious place inside the house. So, yeah, put it in the ground.
And some feel there's still a lot of that treasure in the ground. This is Bill Curd, Brian Cerniglia, and Larry Simmons. three friends who call themselves the Dirt Nerds. Now, you'll find them most weekends out searching for buried treasure and sharing their adventures on social media. They've turned up some interesting items: cannonballs, belt buckles, and breastplates from the Civil War, for example. They say it satisfies their inner Indiana Jones, and they have a knack for knowing where to look for potential treasure.
Whenever I go to an old house like this, I'm like, so where was the master bedroom, when this was owned, and like try to picture, where they would have been looking out so they could still see their cash. It wasn't in the house, it was buried under a fence post or, somewhere they knew, but they could still, if they heard a noise in the middle of the night, they could get up quickly and look out the window and make sure nobody was there.
A metal detector dealer in Shepherdsville, Kentucky, told me his phone rang off the hook for days after the story of the Great Kentucky Hoard became known. Now, it's important to note there is no established link between the hoard and the use of a metal detector, but the technology definitely allows hunters like the Dirt Nerds to find interesting and potentially valuable items underground. Can you tell what that is?
That is a pair of silver cufflinks. Hey!
Silver cufflinks?
Uh-huh.
Now, they're loose here. It's almost like they're on a...
Yeah, cufflinks back then had two little chains.
That's it.
Right in the middle.
Wow. So that's where we thought this story would end. For reasons I'm sure all of us can understand. Most notably, he didn't want several hundred people with metal detectors and shovels tearing through his fields every weekend. The identity of the farmer has never been disclosed. But we reached out to see if we could get his perspective. And after months of a delicate back and forth, we have heard from him. And we'll bring you his...
Somewhere in the bluegrass. The coins date back between 1850 and 1862. It's being called the Great Kentucky Hoard.
When news of the Great Kentucky Hoard broke, it broke big. The story received extensive media attention all across the country, with everyone from the New York Times to the Washington Post to TV news networks covering it. But throughout all of this, one question, a big question, remained. What can you tell us about the farmer? Who is the person that found this?
Well, that was one of the reasons the person came to me. He wanted to, get to know me and talk about, he wanted to do something, but he wanted to stay completely confidential about everything. He didn't want people to, bug him for any reason, or also, dig up his land and things like that. So it's pretty much all, that part's confidential, and I'm just going to remain that way.
But after a couple of months of back and forth, one day I opened up an email to find 3 pages of written responses to questions from the farmer who discovered the Great Kentucky Hoard. These are the only insights anyone has heard from him, and they are fascinating. Here now is his story about how this all happened.
I was in the fields as any other normal day. I started walking a portion of the property where I had seen broken pieces of pottery and brick, strewn in a fairly confined area, when I came across the first coin, something that has happened a decent amount of times. I found my first old coin when I was maybe 9, walking the fields around my hometown looking for arrowheads. But this time, it was a little more exciting. Little did I know what that would lead to next.
I asked, when you first looked down in the dirt and saw the coins, what was going through your mind? Did you realize the enormity of what you had just found and that this was a life-changing event?
I initially found the 1856 seated Liberty half dollar, probably 20 to 30 feet from where the hoard was located. I would have never believed what came next. Things that only happen in dreams. When I continued walking and saw the glint of gold, a thick, reeded edge. When I pulled the coin from the ground, I was astonished when I realized I was holding a $20 double eagle from the 1860s. After I flipped the first clump of dirt, over the next 45 minutes to an hour, the coins kept coming. I knew it was hundreds. I initially guessed around 300 to maybe 400 coins. To my surprise, when I got home and started counting, the total was over 800 coins, 770 of which were gold.
I asked, walk me through the days after the discovery. What were you thinking?
I knew right away that I had made an enormous discovery. I hadn't heard of such a find in the U.S. in ages. I spent hours researching each coin and the different years and varieties to check for rarities and key dates. After researching the key dates for the double legal $20, I realized I had not one, but 18 of one of the rare dates, the 1863 20s. This is when my head began to spin, and I knew I needed help.
Has this changed the way you walk around and look at things?
Surprisingly, not much. As I said, I have spent many years wandering the fields and riverbanks looking for anything that catches the eye. My father did it before me. My great-grandmother had one of the most incredible museum-worthy collections of arrowheads, all found walking cultivated land and the banks of the rivers. I guess maybe it's in my bones. I have always been extremely fascinated with discovering items from the past.
And finally, any advice you'd offer to treasure hunters or anyone else out there captivated by this story?
Keep your eyes out and never stop looking. I never even imagined I would find one gold coin in my entire life, let alone something so significant it has its own hoard name. There are hundreds of stories of lost treasure, hidden stashes from bandits, and just the superstitious wealthy old guys who didn't trust the banks.
How those coins ended up in the ground is a story lost to the ages. But that doesn't mean there aren't lots of theories on why more than $3 million in gold coins were buried in a field somewhere in Kentucky.
So I think that the coins that were found are part of one of the 4 caches that are supposedly in Kentucky that John Hunt Morgan and his men buried when they were the Morgan traders during the Civil War.
So I think this was a landowner somewhere in central western Kentucky. Somebody who's sitting there in 1863, 64 was suddenly alarmed by word, by rumor that Confederate raiders were coming. They're trying to figure out what to do with this. It's too much to sew into their clothing to hide. And so they do the next best thing, which is to dig a hole and put it in the ground.
I think it was a farmer who was alive during the Civil War, heard about soldiers coming through, raiding, stealing, taking people's belongings, decided I'd rather put it out in the field and have it be safe than in my house and the possibility of getting robbed by soldiers.
I think it was buried in a hurry. I think whoever buried it was being chased, so I don't think they had time to bury it very deep.
How they got lost there is anyone's guess, and it could have been, person could have gotten killed, could have forgot they were there. Obviously it was a lot of turmoil in Kentucky at the time. We weren't on the forefront of the Civil War, but there was certainly conflict.
And while we'll never know exactly how they ended up in the ground, many feel there's a lot more out there under the dirt in some Kentucky fields just waiting to be discovered.
It inspires that little bit of hope that there's still stuff like that out there. You think every great treasure's been found, and we chase targets all day, and some days there's not a good one to be found, but it gives you that little bit of hope to keep searching, keep doing the research, keep putting the time in, and just keep going.